After a long, long campaign of masked terror waged against the American people by ICE, the FBI has issued a bulletin to law enforcement urging them to stop wearing the goddamn masks. Which is actually a pretty big deal. There are a million reasons why you don't want law enforcement, especially federal law enforcement, wearing masks, but one of the more obvious ones is if there's no way to identify the agent, wouldn't it be really easy for criminals to just, like, do whatever they want and say they're ICE agents? Like, the way you stop them from doing that with police, right, is you say, like, well, what's your badge? What's your officer number? You make sure they look like they check out, they're real. And you can also call 911 and ask them if they have an officer blank on the scene. That's the way you verify with a cop if you're ever concerned, you know? Sometimes people do go through all the motions of getting a fake badge and everything, and it's not like you know enough about the registry at your local department to know every officer's name, so you know, you can do that. You can't really do that with federal police, though. It's not local enough, you know? So for an ICE agent or fake ICE agent, you can get away with basically anything, and people have been. Robberies, assaults, so on and so forth, you know, kidnappings, presumably a lot of other bad stuff. I imagine it's making the job of the FBI a lot more difficult. The bulletin from the FBI cites 5 2025 incidents involving fake ICE officers and says criminals are using ICE's heightened profile to target vulnerable communities, making it harder for Americans to distinguish between lawful officers and imposters, while eroding trust in law enforcement. A review of public reporting confirms 4 of the 5 cases described in the bulletin. This is also, by the way, another big distinction between America and Nazi Germany, which was that when Nazi Germany started doing its, like, SS, you know, bullshit, like, those officers did not have to wear masks, man. They would just show up because the state had the confidence to have them show up without a mask. Having a law enforcement officer wear a mask is fundamentally delegitimizing. If they're operating with the authority of the state, why would they ever need to hide their face? You know? It doesn't make any sense. It's self-defeating, you know? Like the mask, the mantle of anonymity is something, it inherently confers a sense of weakness, you know? You're operating as part of this, like, cloud of indistinguishable individuals. Somebody operating on behalf of the state should have absolute authority, right? Certainly, if they're a federal law enforcement officer, you know, you wouldn't want to look at them and find them indistinguishable, some random street thug. I've always thought the reason why ICE agents have been wearing masks, not just like sometimes, but all the time, you know, whenever they're out there doing their bullshit, is because a lot of them have been pulled from neo-Nazi militias, you know, the Three Percenters or the Patriot Front or Proud Boys or whatever else, which is probably why those organizations have been relatively quiet since the Trump administration began, you know. These are people who are highly paid, so highly paid, in fact, that their payments were prioritized during the government shutdown. I think partly because they're not very loyal, but also because they don't want people leaving and talking to the press. They probably want to keep it under wraps. In fact, they probably don't even want the people working at ICE to know who their coworkers are. For the most part, they want them to operate as like a big anonymous blob, you know, just a big hateful white supremacist, you know, march that you can deploy to a city and have them terrorize people. Once you have them identifiable, it's easier to ask questions, you know? At any rate, I have a feeling that this bulletin wasn't ordered by Kash Patel because Kash Patel, A, has no interest in running the FBI, and B, whenever he does something, it's just at the behest of Trump, right? He doesn't seem to have any other interests. Has Kash Patel done anything that wasn't directly prompted by Trump or a social media stunt? I don't think so. This is too procedural. On August 7th, according to the FBI, 3 men in black vests entered a New York restaurant claiming to be ICE agents. Inside, they tied a worker's hands and pulled a garbage bag over the person's head. Another, believing the burglar's story, surrendered themselves only to be kicked to the ground and tied up as the intruders robbed an ATM. Oh, there you go. Cases cited by its advisory span kidnappings, street crime, and sexual violence. In Bay County, Florida, the advisory said a woman, quote, unzipped her jacket and revealed a shirt that said ICE, and told her ex-boyfriend's wife she was there to, quote, pick her up before driving her to an apartment complex. The woman later escaped. Sheesh. In Brooklyn, it alleges, a man told a woman he was an immigration officer and, quote, directed her to a nearby stairwell, where he punched her, tried to rape her, and stole her phone before police caught him. In North Carolina, it claims, a man, quote, entered a motel room and threatened to deport the woman if she did not have sex with him. In fairness, that could have been just a regular ICE agent. Who knows? There's been a lot of these. Also, a lot of them have gone unreported. I mean, how do you know, right? How do you know? My personal opinion, I think this is a little bit of rebellion from within the FBI. FBI agents, by and large, the ones that are still working today, are relatively serious people. Not defending the FBI here as an institution. However, most of these people were here before Trump. They're, at least relatively compared to ICE, certainly professionals, and this is their business, federal crime. They take their job seriously. The auspices of the federal law enforcement officer are being cheapened and degraded by ICE's behavior. I don't think Kash Patel did this, but my guess is that FBI senior leadership has been pushing this for a while as a kind of like quiet rebellion against the DHS and the Trump administration. Essentially, stop making us all look like fuckwits. Again, not defending the FBI here, but they're a hell of a lot better on average than a fucking ICE agent.
The FBI issued a memo encouraging ICE officers to stop wearing masks in the field and to specifically identify themselves. That directive came after several incidents of agents being impersonated. ICE agents say they wear those masks to keep them from being doxxed. ICE also says it's concerned about the safety of its agents in the field. In Fullerton, California, this week, police came across a man pointing a gun at a woman on a busy street. He identified himself as an ICE agent and said he felt like she was following him. Joining us now, staff writer at The Atlantic, Nick Miroff. He covers immigration and the Department of Homeland Security and just wrote about the issue of ICE agents wearing face masks. And he says those face mask coverings aren't going anywhere. All right, so Nick, good to have you. Let's talk about the masks. FBI wants them to stop wearing them. Why would they not listen?
Well, I think we've seen other federal agencies.
This is good. Do you think the Department of Homeland Security will go along with it? No. But the fact that the FBI was in a position that they both felt they had to and were able to put forward this bulletin is a good sign to me, I was never that scared by ICE, I guess, conceptually, because ICE, for one, their authority is largely limited to matters of immigration. I'm a citizen, check my privilege and all that. But also, for the most part, they're just like retard thugs. There's only so much structural harm they could do. Their ability to do harm is tied largely to their budget, their popularity, their level of collaboration with local police departments, which has not been good. None of these have been good, mind you. Even their budget isn't sufficient for what they're trying to do. The FBI, on the other hand, are very capable of meaningfully shifting the landscape of American democracy. Targeted FBI actions could, if weaponized properly by the Trump administration, take down political opponents much more effectively. We're talking about actual professionals here, not just, again, thugs. It's just they're capable of operating on a different level, which is probably one of the reasons why so many of them were kept on board even after they tried to, purge the whole FBI. They purged some leadership roles, but for the most part, they kept the actual agents over there. So yeah, the fact that they're even able to do this is a good sign, in my opinion.
That are assisting ICE in this mass deportation campaign quickly adopt the same, face coverings. One veteran ICE official I talked to said that the FBI agents and the other agencies from the Department of Justice seem even more keen to wear even more keen to wear masks than ICE officers because they don't really want to be there. And so I think there's broad concern about, the effect that this is having, on the image of these agencies, even though nobody really expects the masks to come off anytime soon.
How big of a problem are these impersonations?
Well, there have been several, instances already of criminals using masks, claiming to be, federal officers or agents in order to rob people or abuse people in some way or another. And it all points to a deterioration of trust. I mean, I've
seen them firsthand kidnap 15 people from a parking lot. You may not be scared, but people in my area are. Please don't willfully misinterpret me. I'm not saying that ICE hasn't ruined lives. You know perfectly well that I think they do. I'm talking about their ability to do long-term institutional harm. The FBI are I mean, they're intelligence agents. They have if they were directed effectively, they could do a lot of very severe long-term harm to this country. Real Red Scare bullshit. ICE is limited mostly to ground scuffling. You know, it's like the difference between brown shirts and the Gestapo, right? The brown shirts probably, like, at least for a period of time in Germany, roughed people up or killed way more people than the Gestapo did, like during a comparable length of time. Maybe not even. You know, the brown shirts were probably more imminently scary than the Gestapo, but the Gestapo had the ability to you know, do a lot more damage to political opposition in Germany by getting them killed.
Reasons why
you get my
police
point.
officers show their faces and have, you know, name tags on their uniforms is to give people confidence that they are who they say they are and that they should be trusted. And so if you have officers of the law going around looking like, you know, bank robbers or stagecoach robbers with you know, gaiters over their faces, they certainly don't reassure anyone that they're that, you know, that they represent the law, and it's understandable that that people would be confused and lose trust.
Yeah, how is this any different than what we expect and demand of our regular law enforcement officers? I mean, they've got to wear a badge. They have badge numbers. Their names are on their uniforms.
Did you ever cover the story about how half the people applying to be part of ICE washed out due to their lack of physical fitness, and they've been skipping the usual checks on applications? Yeah, no, they are offering every incentive they can, and they are like bringing people in with basically no requirements on their fitness or knowledge or whatever. And I think, again, the reason for that is because they're going for the hardcore ideologues. You know, they're going to take everyone that they can get, and as a consequence, these people are very, very bad at their jobs. A lot of them are way the fuck too old, too young, fat, slow, lazy, and stupid. Most of them are just stupid. It's obvious in any interactions that you see of them, any filmed interactions, right? A lot of these ICE agents, like, we talk about cops being stupid. The average, like, regular beat officer could probably lap the average ICE officer in intelligence, you know?
They're not masked. If a regular police officer who is upholding the law on the streets of this country does not wear a mask and is easily identifiable, why can these ICE agents, these federal agents, hide who they are, hide their identities? I don't understand the two sets of rules.
Well, you know, it
definitely doesn't help that ICE agents are being directed by the, you know, the oft mentioned by me influencer agencies, you know, or influencer administration, because even when ICE is deployed, they're trying to aura farm way the fuck more than they're trying to actually deport people. An example, remember the midnight raid that was conducted in Chicago, the one where they used a Black Hawk helicopter? They went out and arrested a bunch of people, tossed women and children naked out into the street. Not a single one of them was charged. Not a single one. Of all of the people they arrested and threw in the back of their vans, not a single one of them had any charges filed against them. The whole thing was a media op. Yeah, everything's a fucking commercial, but commercials are meant to advertise a product. And in this case, there is no product. You know, it'd be like running commercials for a product that hasn't come out yet. That's a cool art piece, though. Yes, it is. ProPublica did a great job with this one. I mean, they often do a great job. Federal officials declined to release the names of 37 immigrants detained in the raid. ProPublica has identified 21 of them and spoken with a dozen. No charges. The whole article is brilliant, by the way. If I went through the whole thing, it would be gripping, but also quite long. I strongly encourage you to read it yourself. I've added it to my read list. I want to go over it in its entirety. For now, I'm summing up the bullet points for you, which is, yeah, the whole thing was for a fucking commercial. That's it. It's the society of the spectacle. Yeah, you do have to back up. Look, it's just like a good manga, man. You have to back up the aura farming with some actual feats. The feats are not looking good, okay? It's not some. We're not on that Lune shit here in America, okay? The feet are not looking good.
Points to a major difference between policing by state and local authorities versus federal authorities. If we think about this, you know, the police officers in your city or town are accountable to the elected officials of your local jurisdiction, of the mayor, and they have spent, you know, decades trying to gain the trust of the community. The community pays their salaries, And
Nazis built public support by actually delivering on at least some of their promises. I mean, most of it was just rebounding from the Great Depression, but it's also worth noting that the Nazis were distinct from this administration and that they were interested in the project of nation building. They had people within their, within their circle who wanted to build things, not just aura farm on Twitter or whatever, but, actually work on like a civilizational project. Let me give you an example, okay? The Hitler Youth, right? The takeover of Germany's educational system, okay? Very damaging in the long run in Germany, destructive, right, bad. We all agree Hitler is bad. Thank you. But the actual logistical difficulties involved in essentially replacing an entire nation's curriculum, that's actually that takes a lot of effort. I'm not saying you have to be a genius to do it. I'm saying you have to have serious people working on it and taking it seriously. That's it. And even that low bar cannot be met by this administration. There are no big projects that they're willing to work on with that kind of fastidiousness. Not even a little bit, Anything that would require some actual work, some actual elbow grease, they have no patience for it. Absolutely none. They don't want to deliver on anything they talk about. They built Alligator Alcatraz. It was shut down immediately afterwards. They tried to build a bunch of copycat concentration camps. What happened to them? What happened to anything they advocated for? What happened to invading Portland? What happened to invading Chicago? What happened to invading LA? Oh, you sent a couple hundred Marines, then they went back to Fort Bragg. Goodbye. Like, it's everything they do, man. Everything. It's all a commercial for a product that doesn't exist. Don't get me wrong. Stuff like this is doing, stuff like this does do real harm. I mean, it's more destructive to the fabric of our country than possibly a bunch of ill-intended projects, but
and they have uniforms, they represent your city, your community. They want people to know who they are and to trust them, and they are in it for the long haul. Federal agencies like ICE, like these Border Patrol agents that have been deployed to places like LA and Chicago, are accountable really to the White House and to faraway federal agencies. And there's almost no local control over what they're doing. And so they are in there to execute a specific mission set. In this case, a mass deportation campaign on behalf of the president. And so they don't.
I've read countries only last for around 200 and 250 years. History slop, not real. There are countries that last 2 years. There are countries, or I guess you should say civilizations, that last 2,000. Nothing is fated. There is nothing that innately guides our country towards destruction. With good policy and good advocacy, you can keep a good thing going for a long time. And if you fail, you don't. Don't give in to fatalism, okay? Not a real thing.
Care if people are upset about not being able to see their faces.
Where's the line, though, for drawing their weapon? I mean, we have this reporting that I mentioned a moment ago from Fullerton, California, where an ICE agent pulled his gun and pointed it at a woman in a car. He says the woman was following him. She says she wasn't. She lives in that neighborhood. What is the bar that they have to clear to pull out a weapon and point it at an individual?
Okay, we're seeing cases like this pretty much every day in which Border Patrol agents or ICE officers are pulling out their weapons when confronted with angry protesters or crowds or people that they think are following them. It points to how edgy the current environment is in a lot of these cities where ICE and the Border Patrol are deployed very aggressively. And there have been 2 shooting instances in Chicago so far. No one is going to be surprised if there are more. And the federal government is eager to charge people with obstructing federal officers, getting in the way. But some of these protest tactics that we've seen, especially in Chicago and Los Angeles, have made it much harder for ICE and the Border Patrol to do the kinds of raids and roundups that they want to do. And so I don't think we should be surprised if we see more instances like this of weapons being drawn.
Edgy isn't incorrect, by the way. Edgy can mean like a situation is on edge. That's not semantically incorrect.
Can
I linger on what you said a moment ago, that there are some out there in the field who are covering their face because they don't want to be there? What are you hearing from folks like that?
I hear from veteran ICE officials all the time who know that this is bad for the agency's image, that it's bad for law enforcement generally. It's bad for the country to have federal.
I have no respect for these people. I shouldn't even have to say it, but like, no, you don't get to be a member of the brown shirts just because they have salary and benefits. Like oh yeah, I think what we're doing to the Jews is bad, but like, you know, I mean, I'm embarrassed that I'm here personally, but you know, whatever. No, fuck you.
Agents and officers going around, wearing face coverings and masks and looking intimidating. Certainly, there are plenty of officers and agents that are happy to do this. That that are eager to cover up like this. But there are many others that feel very conflicted about what they're doing. They've never been asked to do a job like this in which they're out in public, grabbing people on the street, being filmed constantly. In many cases, being confronted with angry.
I don't like this apologia. Being an ICE agent has always meant being a merchant of misery. You're an arbiter of suffering. It's just more politically, out in the open now. You've always been that.
Residents and families. It's a very stressful job, and putting on a mask for a lot of these agents and officers is a way to kind of opt out of that and to try to wall it off a little bit from what they have to do.
Yeah, Nick Miroff of The Atlantic. Nick, thanks so much for joining us.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, fuck you. I don't respect that. Yeah, they tried running a hiring fair for Border Patrol at military installations, targeting military and civilian workers. They're so desperate they're poaching their own workforce. Oh, I bet they would fucking love to have people as competent as like active military in ICE. That would be great for them. Are you kidding me? The average fucking the average just like 4-year term guy is probably leagues beyond the average ICE agent in terms of general competence.